Hello, I'm Brian Gentle and I'm going to make a speech for you about fish farming and particularly salmon. Now there's one point I want to say straight away, and that I want to talk about something called sea lice, which is a nasty kind of pest that infects salmon. And so if you don't know what to say, just say a nasty pest or something similar, and hopefully that will do. And now I'll begin. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think the United Kingdom's biggest food export is? Well, as you might have guessed from the title of the subject, the answer is salmon. In particular, salmon produced in Scotland. Since the year 2014, this has been Britain's biggest food export. Before that time, it was sweets and chocolate, but now salmon, which is perhaps a healthier option. Scotland produces about 160,000 tonnes of salmon every year. That may sound impressive, but I would just say that the world's biggest producer of salmon is Norway, and they produce 1.1 million tonnes of salmon a year, so Scotland's contribution is less than 10%. Nevertheless, Scottish salmon is something special. It is it's perceived as a high-quality product. Obviously, this salmon is not wild salmon, it is farmed. It's farmed, the fish are kept in cages in the water, a bit like battery hens, I suppose. But efforts are made to ensure that the fish, at least in the cages in Scotland, are not jammed in too tightly, so they have room to swim around. As the fish can swim around, they develop more muscle fat, and more muscle, I beg your pardon, and therefore less fat. And this lean fish attracts a higher price on the market. So Scotland can charge 10% above the average price for their salmon. This very lean fish is extremely popular in Southeast Asia, and that includes China as well. In 2016, which is the year I have figures for, 11,000 tonnes of salmon were exported to Southeast Asia, and that was worth £73 million, 73 million pounds sterling. And this low-fat fish is very popular in Japan, for instance, for the production of sushi and sashimi, for instance. Scottish salmon is also very popular in the European Union. In that same year, Scotland exported 35,000 tonnes to other EU countries. Of course, as I said, Scottish salmon is of high quality, and its good reputation is helped by a somewhat unusual ally, namely the Scottish whisky industry. Because it seems that these two might not work together very well, although personally, if I had a glass of whisky and a bit of smoked salmon, it would be very pleasant. Yet, because of the fact that the Scotch whisky industry is considered to be high quality, a lot of people conclude that, well, if the whisky is good, the salmon must be good as well. And that has helped the salmon industry to export its products so effectively. Nevertheless, fish farming is not something that is universally welcomed by everybody. Environmentalists have been particularly concerned about some of the issues surrounding the farming of salmon. You might think that this might be just a form of scaremongering, but it seems to be sufficiently important because the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the WWF, have listed fish farming as a priority issue which they want to deal with. They mention 5 issues, although I personally think some of them overlap somewhat. Let me explain what those issues are. Firstly, there's the question of chemicals. These fish are fed antibiotics for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it helps them to grow more quickly. But secondly, because as these fish are so close together, there's a real risk that they might catch certain diseases, and therefore the antibiotics are supposed to combat that. But the cages are just in rivers or in the sea, and the water flows in and out of them. So the antibiotics get out of the cages and start to pollute the rivers and seas around and have an effect on the marine life. The second problem they raise is escapes, because some of these salmon actually get out of the cages and then compete with wild salmon for the same scarce feed resources, which of course is a problem for the environment because all of a sudden there are much more salmon in the river than there would normally be. The third problem has to do with the way that these fish are fed. They are fed a highly nutritious diet, and some of that food is not actually eaten by the fish, but actually, again, gets out into the surrounding water. At the same time, this high concentration of fish in a small space reduces the level of oxygen in the water. Both of these things have an effect on the biodiversity of the surrounding area and therefore can form a problem. Now, the fourth issue that the WWF have mentioned is not a problem in Scotland, but it is in other areas, and that is social issues. You see, this industry is very labour intensive, and in some countries the workers in the industry are being exploited. So that again is a problem that environmentalists and, come to that, human rights experts have raised. And finally, there's the question of disease and pesticides. Despite all the antibiotics that I mentioned earlier on, these animals do get sick. And one thing these fish seem to be particularly susceptible to is a pest called a sea louse or sea lice. Now these pests, whatever they are, they get into the fish, and as a result the fish weakens. And so the only thing that the fish farmers can do is to kill the fish straight away and sell them even though they haven't reached their maximum weight, which means that the farmers lose out. Unfortunately, there's no cure for these sea lice. People have had various ideas. Put them in bigger cages deeper in the water where the lice won't survive, for instance. Or introduce other fish which would eat the sea lice, which works in theory, but these fish prefer to eat the feed that's there for the salmon. Plus, the salmon actually like to eat these fish, so it doesn't work very well. What we should do, therefore, is to continue enjoying our salmon. I don't think we have to say we won't eat salmon anymore, but let's be responsible and ensure that the fish that we eat come from farms which are properly managed. Thank you.